Hey YouTube, we are doing something a bit different for this video, so we'll see how it goes. I am recording at night. You can tell the lighting is different and probably not as good, but I really wanted to get this topic out and I didn't want to wait until the next non-stormy day. So let me know if you think this lighting situation is a deal breaker for the future. But the topic I wanted to cover today is two cards in the major arcana, the Emperor and the Hierophant. Cards 4 and 5. So the framework I'm going to use for this is that I like to think of the Emperor as structure as man and the Hierophant as structure as text or tradition. That's a little simplified, but that's the basic idea of how I think about it. They're both about structure, order, practice, but the Emperor as man and then the Hierophant as text or tradition. So the Emperor, I think of, order, authority, leadership, rules, and logic in the form of a person. And that can be good or bad. Like, you can have a positive leader who has a lot of control and a lot of rules. You can also have an abusive, authoritarian version of that, especially in the form of a single person. But then the 4 leads into the 5, and so this leads into the Hierophant, structure as text, tradition, ritual, practice. I think, I'm using, just to show you, using this Spirit Within Tarot. I don't really like the Pope version of the card, the versions that have the Pope, because I think it's a little misleading. I mean, I guess you can think of the Pope as symbolic as the translation of the word, but I think that the Hierophant is less about a person and it's more about translation or revelation. It's about the moment when you get a hit from divine and are able to turn that into words, to turn that into something concrete in the physical world, whether that is a text or a practice or a system or a ritual or what have you. And I think too about the way that even though a text is typically written by somebody, and certainly people can put bad intention or destructive intention into a text, that once a text is written, it's sort of its own thing and it transcends the author. So if you've read, for example, a snippet of poetry before where you felt that flash of connection with something greater, with the universal, even though it's written by its creator, it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the creator in the sense that that person could be long gone as a person, but they have created this thing that is now a thing on its own. And it is the words that give you that feeling or that connection. And I mean, I think it's important that text isn't necessarily better than a person. So I'll give this one example from Egypt Urnash, the Tarot of the Silicon Dawn. So here's the card, rename the High Priest, in that tarot. And the guidebook says, so you can see kind of a person that's almost made of text. Is there anything to him under the text? How much of the direct experience of the transcendent is still there? I mean, there are certainly people out there who do their best to behave sensibly to each other based on that holy book. But there are also a lot of people out there who use picky, literal readings of it to justify treating each other in the shittiest imaginable ways. So I think that's a good point, that text, even if the intentions of the writer were good, that text can be twisted in all sorts of ways as well. But I think in a way that can be a good thing, and one thing that the Hierophant always makes me think of is the tarot itself and the way, I mean, I spoke in a previous video about how, all these like white European occultist dudes talking about the tarot as like this secret that only certain people can access. But once the tarot existed and once the tarot was down as a system and became accessible to at least some people, it was immediately reformed, reshaped, reinterpreted, and became a different thing. So even if you use a fairly strict, like the original system, and incorporate a lot, original, kind of uncertain in the case of the tarot, but even if you use that system and you are right into the structure, so again, like the structure of the system, it can still have a different meaning and a different connection for you. And then of course everyone who creates a tarot deck after that is actually reframing the text and changing it and letting it evolve. And I think that's one of the really cool things about what the Hierophant represents for me. It's interesting that, so I almost think, I don't know if this is common, but I almost think of the Emperor could even be the person who receives something from divine and turns it into the tradition or text of the five, the Hierophant. And it's interesting how the Emperor as a person has control, but as soon as something goes beyond the Emperor, as soon as the Emperor writes something down, then the Emperor, the person, no longer has control over it. And I feel like that could be very liberatory. Like that progression from 4 to 5 could be a liberatory thing. And I mean, you could think of anything in human history this way, not just religion or scripture, but like, a lot of assholes in the past wrote stuff down, interpreted their own history in a way that we find appalling, but then we are able to use their texts, even if incomplete and even if not from a perspective that we would necessarily choose. We can use their texts to find something, to create something, to draw some connection with ancestors or past. So I don't know, I think that's a really powerful line. I would be super curious to know what you think. So if you do have any thoughts on the Emperor and the Hierophant, please leave them below. And also, if there's any particular cards that you would enjoy a deep dive like this on, I can't guarantee. I'm not, I don't have as many thoughts about every card in the tarot, but I'd be happy to do more videos like this. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe. All right, thank you.